There we are, back we start. So to continue on what I'll show you. So when we use this iWorks, whatever lab we're going to do, and today we're going to do one even because it applies exactly to what we did, which is hearing and sight. And I alluded to it before. Actually, you respond to an auditory stimulus faster than a visual stimulus. And we'll endeavor to prove that with a couple of volunteers. This is non-invasive. Okay, I'm not offering any compensation for this. Opportunity to laugh. So here it shows you where to put the electrodes, et cetera, et cetera. Here it gives you the red lead to the left wrist or under the left clavicle. We generally use the wrist. The black one to the right. The green almost anywhere, leg, abdomen, because it's a ground. In effect, if you did not know, cardiography is creating a series of triangles around your heart. So in the old days, we have what we call limb leads. Right and left wrists, right and left ankles. And basically now you just put the pads that we have here, but I wouldn't do them on the chest. So generally they put one here, one here, one here. And you basically have any three of them, one being positive, one being negative, one being a ground. And it creates a series of triangles. And I'll explain that to you when we do the cardiac unit. Okay, so I like to do the EKG. I think it's fascinating. And even though we don't use them as much as we used to, as our technology has improved, there's still a place for them. So for instance, here I am. I had a minor procedure that happened to be done up in Grove City Hospital because that's where between my doctor and the insurance played well together. The insurance from here is UPMC, and he's from Allegheny Health, and the only place where he operates, where they'll take it, is up in Grove City. Nice place. I know Grove City very well. And what happened was they had, in order for me to have this procedure, because it was going to be under anesthesia, even though it probably was out for 20 minutes tops, that at my age, I have to have a cardiogram. Chest x-ray, electrocardiogram, blood panel. So then they give you the idea of what you do. We're going to record, we'll click it on, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have anything to make inputs with. So if I go back down here and I would start to hit record, you're not going to see a whole lot. Okay. But effectively what's happening, you can see the timer's going, but I don't have anything plugged in here for us to record. So when we do it, I'll have a sensor on somebody's finger for pulse, and down here, and we'll have the cardiogram up here. And then we can adjust it by scaling. And you see now, you can see the scale. It's just getting a little electrical chatter, probably from the vibration in the room. Not a whole lot. Okay. And then you stop it, and theoretically, you could measure from ear to ear in between the chatter points. Give you some idea, but we're not going to do that, obviously. So just to give you an idea, and it's not the only one that we've done. When I go back here to my files, so I did breathing parameter setup. We did electroencephalography, which you can do. Didn't get a lot out of that. Electrocardiography. Frankly, it's the same people who are doing it. FVC. This is breathing based. So okay, they found the hardware. This is always encouraging. And then what I can do is, now they're measuring some electrical activity at the same time, which wasn't that terribly relevant. But we were able to, I'm not getting anything really dynamic with that. That one didn't work. Go back. And Jacob, if you're interested, and I forgot to tell you, if you use the tutoring center, two of my students who are now seniors, Jacob and Matt, are doing A&P tutoring, if you're interested. Okay, if you like it, if that works for you, fine. They're not compensating me. If they compensated me, I would do something better. You're supposed to laugh. Oh, this is a tough, here we go. Now, I don't know, I don't think this was the same mat. I think we had a surplus of mats. in my last. So take a look from here to here, okay? This is called forced vital capacity. This determines how healthy your lungs are. Now, it's normally these studies are done on older individuals, histories of smoking, lung disease, tuberculosis, you name it. Okay. So, and this is the voltage, but we have them take, imagine taking your deepest breath and blowing it out as fast as you can. So now you have maybe a peak of about 1.4 liters to about 2.8. That's 4.2 liters. That's a really good vital capacity. And you would expect that from a student population. That's the only limitation with this, is you're typically all young, healthy individuals, more or less. Okay. For years, I did a lot of non-traditional students at community colleges. You would get a wider range of variations in pulse, sometimes because some of them were frankly, could have been in better health, like it would be for me. So where my wife, who's very healthy for her age, would have an excellent one of these, never smoked a thing in her life. Like that. Very healthy, used a lot of homeopathic stuff, all that types of stuff. So she doesn't go for any. The only medicine was that one I was telling you about, the Tegretol that she takes. Other than that, she decries it. Okay, so it gives you an idea. So the other thing that I wanted to cover is kind of what we're looking at today. So it gives you a little idea of some of the things that we can do with this. It's not all of them. There's one more, and we can probably play around with this as well. Fatigue. This was testing muscle activity over time. And so this is almost like, thank you. When it does that, it allows you to do stuff with this that you can analyze it. It says hardware recognized. That's one of the ways. But you can see over a point of roughly, let's say this was about a minute and 2 seconds to what it was here. Okay, so you get an idea of the seconds that have elapsed. And you can see she was squeezing, there's a rubber ball in there. Looks like a rubber ball. It's like the squeezer that you have for a blood pressure cuff. And she would hold that. How long can you hold it? And how rapidly it fatigues. That's the kind of thing we were measuring. To give you an idea, and what you have an idea what the normals are. Okay. So I'll show you this other one, and it's kind of what we're hoping to do. And it doesn't always work that way. What I'm telling you about with regard to visual versus not, visual stimuli versus auditory stimuli. So we'll take auditory. Nastia graduated a couple of years ago. And so again, we're trying to get an idea from when they recorded the stimulus to when they responded. So where you see this black line that's here, and then you see her response to it, that is someone basically, what we have them do is to press a button on the computer, and basically you're sort of like shielding them, and then they respond. So take a look at what the interval was. It's very fast. That's 300 milli, 0.3 seconds, rapid. So we'll take the same individual and go back here, and the way I had it set up was visual. So same gal. And she made a point of laughing at most of my jokes. Okay. Getting the idea? I'm not happy about it. So now let's see what the interval was for her. This would be visual. So did she respond faster or slower? Not everybody's the same. Now there's half a second. Okay. And what happened there? So in the auditory one, someone will be working the computer. The subject, who's ever got the button in their hand, like this, will hear. You will say, if you're the one doing, you'll say Mark, and at the same time you'll simultaneously push, like I think it's F1 on the computer, And the person, as soon as they heard the word Mark, boom, boom, boom. And you vary it. You do it about 10 times, so we average it out. So you'll hear Mark, Mark, then it'll be a delay, Mark, okay, and then Mark, Mark, so you do it twice. And so you'll try to randomize the interval so the person can't anticipate it. So that, and now in the visual, it's different because they're going to be looking at the computer this way. You're going to have, whoever it is, going to have their hand over it and try to make it so they'll be hitting the appropriate button. Let's say it was F1 or something like that. Okay? So that's kind of the way that that proceeds. So I will X out of these. Got a lot of those. And since I already saved these, I don't need to save them again for sure. And so it's easy if we do them for real. You can, on the university computers, not this one, unfortunately, why I have to do it here, not the one at the podium, have this software embedded. So you can access it, and I'll give you the codes, which is basically my email, and then there's a login code. So you sign in that, and there's unlimited downloads of it. So you can download it yourself and just use my login information. So we'll go back here to where it says settings. I go to foundations. Now we're going to do sight hearing reflexes. And it shows you what we have. The only instrument that we need here is this. So the only thing I have to plug in is this piece. And I just have to plug that in. As you can see, it tells you there's an EM1 port there. So now we're good to go with it. So that's what the EM stands for, event marker, like that. So you're going to be, whoever is going to be doing this reaction is going to see a black line. So watch the right side of the computer screen and quickly press the event marker when you see that black line. The person operating will press the F1 key, which it can react to the line. Now, when you're doing visual, okay, reaction time and sight, you're basically being very quiet, holding your hand over the left side of the computer where F1 is. So you're not saying anything, they're just going to hit F1. Do that. So you have to click on the record button. You want to do the F1 key, varying the time between the clicks for about 10 of them. And then regard. The subject isn't going to look at the screen at all. They'll be looking back here, and they'll just hear when I say the word, this time click the F1 and very loudly tell the subject whatever you want to tell them. You want to say, Mark, now, go, pick a word. And we do the same thing. That's the whole thing in a nutshell. Who said that was difficult? So we do this, not the EKG one, but the sight hearing one right here. And so once we're ready to go, we're able to go along and do this. That's there. So I should be able to get this to work. I'm not seeing my record button. That's annoying. Hold on. Let's hope it works. Make sure everything's plugged in. Okay. Well, let's see if we can make it look good. All right. It's yours. So now, yeah, they found the hardware, so we're good. Now, look. So I'll be new. We don't want to save it. There we are. So now what will happen is, imaginarily, and I won't save this one, here it's going, and someone would say, Mark, and you'd go, boom. And at the same time you're saying, Mark, you're pushing, let's say simultaneously F1 and then boom. So now you'd be able to measure those. And the visual line occurs. Then we'd stop it, and then we can compress it. So the data, we can bring the data closer. You see, now I can bring the data closer together and measure that interval. Voila. So we'll start a new file. There you go. So on that note, do we have a volunteer for us left to do this next time? So we're volunteering. No? No one wants to be? Yes, what I like. All right, so you're a subject. Okay, your name is? Very good. You sit here. Who wants to test? Or yes, you do. I can see that. Okay, so we will start. Come over here. Sit closer here. You're going to be. We'll do the visual, which is a little harder. So again, you're going to shield. We're going to start it on record. You're going to shield it there. You don't have to say anything. Okay, but you just have to shield when you're going to press that F1. Right. So you should be focusing there because the black line is going to show itself. And you guys will be able to see it on TV.
So when she presses the F1 key, there will be a
black line, and as soon as you see it, bang. Okay. And you. Yeah, whenever you want to start. There's no right or wrong with this. Wait. Freeze launch. There you go. Here it times. Here are the responses. And first we go discard. Okay, great. And you can stop. And then you'll see over here, we're not done yet.
Oh.
You're not done yet. It's still going. You should hit the stop button.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. So what we would normally do is average these, and these two red cursors, what's neat about them is, again, you can put it where the black line is, and you can take the other one and put it roughly on the start of the response. And you take a look. Okay, 555 milliseconds. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we will get a new one, but we'll save this one. Okay? LAURA?
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. And now that we saved it, we put a new one out and we don't have to save the other. They already know we saved it. So this one's easy. You're going to turn your head back there. You're going to do the same thing, but you can just press. When you press the F1, you have to basically make some, say now, go, mark, whatever, or whatever. Okay. Let's go.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Probably good. Yeah. Great. So yeah, go up there. That's a touch screen, by the way.
Oh, is it?
They give us a good computer.
Oh.
When I'm retiring, I'm keeping this. If you don't mind, move for a second. You're whom?
Amber.
I'll get the names down. I promise you, by December. I'm not good with this. I mess up my kids and my grandkids' names, like most of us do. Everybody's looking at you. Yeah, we're sure of that. So let's just pick one at random and see if and it should be. I mean, it's generally fairly consistent.
There was really one that was like super close.
Yeah,
It was like back more.
I'll get it. Look at that. That's roughly half the time is visual. So you said to scroll back.
Yeah. It was like spot on. That one.
Yeah, look at that. Okay.
And that one too.
So and some people are just respond better than others. Now look at that. It's not 1/4. I mean, it's 1/10 of a second, slightly more than 1/10 of a second. So, and a lot of people, your reaction times differ, but understand that this is the way to frame it, if you don't mind. The way to frame it is to understand that you and I, there's a certain amount of processing that's involved in visualizing. Even something that visually reflects and hearing, there's a little less time. So you're responding to a audible cue versus seeing that cue, and then your mind has to say, "Oh, that's the black line. I got this one." I want to think of it that way. And people find it counterintuitive. And counterintuitive means you're not expecting that result. Oh, if I see something, I really respond to it quickly. Well, it's not necessarily the case. Counterintuitive means I'm thinking it's going to be. This is going to be what I'm going to see, but the reality is I don't. That's not to be. If you would return to your regular seat, because I'm going to teach from here, very, very briefly. So I'll save this for posterity, and I'll probably. You really don't have to download the software or anything like that now. I'll get that information to you. Like I said, we're not going to. I'm going to be here for another 10 or 15 minutes. That's going to be. I know.
So sad.
I know.
So sad.
I'll tell you why. Because we have reservations up in Erie. My wife wants to take the dog to the dog-friendly areas in Presque Isle. It's for our anniversary. She's taking the dog. It's a giant dog, and she's taking the dog. We're all staying in the same room. We have 2 beds. Well, guess who's sleeping on the floor? Not the dog. This is what I have to deal with. I really, I just don't think it's right. So by the time I get back and we get organized and get out the door, which is going to be an hour and a half up there. So Presque Isle is not. It's when you're talking about beachfront property, it's fairly close. I have it up here. I can't show it to you. All right, moving on. So let me X out of that and that. And so really, we have covered the peripheral nervous system. In that last PowerPoint, there's not a whole lot. It talks about some of the specific sensors. I don't think there's a lot of information. It talks about certain kinds of circuitry that we see, but I don't really think that there's a great deal to it comparatively that's there. And I mean, it's an opportune time for me. I typically like to, as we're leaving, introduce what the next unit is. I'm going to generate some type of a quiz, and I'll let you know. My guess is it would not be next week, because I'd like a little more information on it, and we'll go from there. So let me see if I can find this, because I have them. Well, I have it on Blackboard, so it doesn't really matter. So I'll find this somewhere. Yeah, I'll use the physio one. You'll have it on yours. If you don't, I'll load it for you. It's like I said, it's been a while since I have done this, in the lecture component and the lab component simultaneously, but I'll see if I can answer the bell with this. Let's go see. Endocrine. And so the next unit, so that's what concludes chapter 13. 14 was the autonomic nervous system. And you told me that you had been familiar with that already. So endocrine is the next player in this. And I just want to introduce it and take 10 or 15 minutes to do that and say happy dance. Goodbye. It's an expression I use. So unfortunately, I download these things more frequently. It's still downloaded. What's the matter? Something I said? Oh, it's got to open the PowerPoint. All right. So a little bit of background for it that's there. Endocrine is most of what you have done at the end of AP1 and the start of AP2 have been nervous system. You did the central nervous system. You did the nervous tissue is the way they phrase in the chapter, all the different kinds of cell. You did the autonomic nervous system. Now you did the peripheral nervous system. That's a lot of nervous system. Nervous system makes very, very rapid corrections, with the exception of autonomic, which makes them in many ways a bit slower. But the one that is long-term control, and long is an interesting comment, because it's not, central nervous system, we're talking about instantaneous, seconds, fractions of a second. When we have an autonomic nervous system can be longer, considerably. Endocrine is like that as well. And inevitably, in the human body, things that take a while to happen also take a while to change back to normal. So it's longer term. Longer term can be seconds, minutes, hours, days, etc. So that's what endocrine is. And endocrine are glands that go directly into your bloodstream, and they're extraordinarily potent. And the single most important thing that many of you are going to encounter is the section that we do on diabetes, which is part of this. Diabetes classified as an endocrine disorder. So when we talk about glandular problems, thyroid disorders, endocrine disorders, adrenal gland disorders are all in this package that you will see. So it's one, and I like this unit because it's very much, even though I'm starting it here in lab in the interest of time, it's a physiological unit, much more than anything else. So I'll give it to you this way and you can see it. Okay. So the two major control systems, endocrine and nervous. We did the nervous, now we're doing the endocrine. The stuff that it gives off are called hormones. We've all heard of the name. And by definition, they traverse or travel almost exclusively by way of the bloodstream. And, the ology means it has very limited anatomy. You have a handful of endocrine glands that are comparatively small for the monstrously large job they do. So the distinction, slowly, duration is longer, hormones into very specific or all over targets. We talk about human growth hormone, all over. Talk about insulin, all over. Thyroid, all over. You talk about luteinizing hormone, okay, you're being very, very specific to producing either estrogen or progesterone or testosterone. So you're just talking about reproductive hormones. Very, very specific. And so typically you can have very, very long distances that are there. So it's the giant player in all of these. Reproduction, growth and development, fluid and electrolyte balance, okay? Cellular metabolism, that's where thyroid comes in. Body defensive, because in combination, it can trigger sort of the maturation and development as well as the implementation of immunological system. Maybe that's the way to express it. How do they distinguish themselves from exocrine glands? They don't have a ductor. It's not like they're coming out on your skin or being deposited, and we'll study them like the digestive system. So hence you'll see that these relatively small structures are surrounded by a rather generous nest of blood vessels. And it's almost like the blood vessels soak up the secretions as they kind of ooze out like a sponge, and it goes directly in there, and it's extraordinarily rapid. But people don't understand that, and it's a little different now. But for instance, I'll give you the saga of. So I had this procedure done in June that I was telling you about with the cardiac, June 1st. So nowadays they use something called propofol. It puts you to sleep almost instantly, but it wears off extremely rapidly, and you don't have that ridiculous hangover. Okay. So, I mean, I didn't even, next thing I knew, I was asleep. Prior to that, we used what were called ultra fast acting barbiturates. So, sodium pentothal, known as thiopental. And I mean, they'd inject that into your IV and say, count back from 100. 199. By 98, you're done. I always wanted to have like headphones or iPods because it were, it brings you back to when we were in college where we had a lot of substances and music simultaneously. Don't repeat that. The statute of limitations is ended. I matriculated in 1969. That was the fall immediately after this thing called Woodstock there. I think you probably heard of it. That's true. If you like music of that genre, and I don't know because you're so much younger than I am, if you get, or you can tentatively get a week's free of what used to be called Epics, it's called MGM Plus now, that particular app. It's got like 3 of the best ones called Laurel Canyon. There's another one at A&M Records, and they recently just dropped another, they're all 2 episodes on the San Francisco Sound, which was Grateful Dead and Santana and Jefferson Airplane. And they try to track back Big Brother and the Holding Company to late Janis Joplin. Very good stuff. It's the same. So I'd encourage you. We're not going to do a class on it. Maybe you could justify that given the substances. I'm just saying. So endocrine glands, limited anatomically. Pituitary, thyroid. Behind the thyroid are extraordinarily tiny ones that are super important called para. Next to the thyroid, parathyroid. The adrenal glands, 2 little lumps of tissue sit on top of your kidneys. Pineal gland, it's like a little pine cone. You may or may not have seen that in the brain section when you did. It's very, very small. Okay, the hypothalamus is a significant part of the endocrine system. It produces some hormones, and it also is where all the sensors are that govern a lot of why hormones are released. So these are dual function, meaning they act both as endocrine and exocrine. The pancreas digestive juices are exocrine through a duct into the gastrointestinal tract, and the aforementioned insulin, glucagon, directly into the bloodstream. Gonads, same deal. They make exocrine function is eggs and sperm. But the endocrine function, again, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, we'll get all of that. And placenta in a similar ballpark with that, because it has both elements that produces hormones that circulate throughout the body, like estrogen and progesterone, but the same, they're sort of like direct influenced by substances going to the developing fetus. So other ones that are there. Fat cells make one called leptin. Okay, thymus, very important for your immune system. We have other ones that you're going to see when we get to all of these structures that are there. Kidneys, really important. Kidneys made something you learned about, I would suspect, in bone. We'll go over it in blood, called erythropoietin. That's the kind of stuff that's what tends to project that it's in the kidney, but it stimulates your bone marrow to make more red blood cells. And you can see the distribution of these wonderful things that are there. You can see, and they're tiny. Pancreas, largest maybe of them. Gonadal tissue, very tiny. Adrenal glands, tiny. Thymus shrinks as soon as we're born, starts shrinking. By the time you're 17, it's almost flat, negligible. Thyroid is just that soft flesh you can feel around your Adam's apple. Not a whole lot up here either. It limited by where they go. Okay, hormones by implication are long distance, mostly blood, maybe in the lymph. Ones that work over short distances have additional names. They're called autocrine and paracrine. Auto means self. So even though, imagine secreting a hormone that travels infinitesimally short distance, and you'll see that in the gut, where we have something called gastrin, which are made by G cells, known as enteroendocrine cells in the stomach, that actually trigger. So when we put something in our stomach, it triggers the production of a hormone that generates a greater degree of activity. It's like, they're eating something, we better get busy. Love that. I like that. Small intestine, the same thing. Paracrines, very interesting, local messengers. Okay, so really they're not technically endocrine, and paracrines are important because they're we a lot of medications interact with those. Okay, the next time you take an ibuprofen for something, and we all do, or an aspirin for something, that really works on tiny chemicals that are in the family of paracrines called prostaglandins. They're originally oxidative. So they're really a significant player. You will find, and we're going to go into this next time because it's too much for today, that the ones I was just telling you about are called, the prostaglandins are called eicosanoids. It has to do with something you may or may not have remembered learning about called an essential fatty acid. We have essential amino acids, which makes something a complete protein. So if you're eating an animal product, it's a complete protein. If you're having a glass of milk, it's a complete protein. But it's of impact for vegans, particularly since they don't eat animal products. Okay. And there aren't a whole lot of vegetable-based or plant-based that are pure or complete proteins. There's one that's used all the time, and that's tofu. So tofu, soybean curd, love it. You go in the strip district to Lotus, and they make their own, and a lot of these places make their own tofu, and you can get those really cheap, and it's really good. You can squeeze the water out of it, dice it, marinate it, fry it up, happy days. Just don't spill it, because the manager there, we call him the tofu Nazi. He's like, don't do that. You're leaking. He yelled, I thought I was going to use my tofu privileges. That's a takeoff on the old Seinfeld called Soup Nazi. It's a great episode of Seinfeld. So my wife and I started channeling that. Nevertheless, the eicosanoids are in that particular area. And so when we talk about an essential fatty acid, these are acids that you get from certain foods that you have to intake. Okay, and they form these in the prostaglandin or eicosanoid. All the other ones, they're only in two categories. They're amino acid based or they're steroidal based. And this is where we really get to see the impact of steroidal compounds and cortisone compounds. So they're either effectively a protein based or a fat based. The only one, and if you wanted to broad brush it, the amino acid based ones, like insulin, can't enter the cell. They're much too big. They are polypeptides or proteins that are non-fat soluble, so they have to go through that signaling pathway, the G protein pathway, as you've already seen a couple of times in Hearing Insight. Steroids are relatively small fat-compatible compounds. They get right through the membrane. Okay, they get right into the cell. They contact a receptor in the cytoplasm, and then that receptor complex with that steroidal-based hormone can go into the nucleus and trigger trigger the formation of proteins. So you're going to be able to see that. So they work. There's one oddball. It's the old story. Always remember the exceptions, and that's thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone, I touched on it earlier, something involving something called tyrosine. Tyrosine's pretty neat. Tyrosine makes a variety of you learned about it with norepinephrine and epinephrine and dopamine in autonomic. Tyrosine makes a lot of interesting things. And one of the things it makes, as well as those neurotransmitters, is it makes thyroid hormone. But what happens, you get two molecules of a amino acid, which is not fat soluble. When you place them symmetrically, it becomes fat soluble. So it's the oddball. It's an amino acid based hormone that acts like a fat soluble. And so, and they target cells, they alter target cell activity, all these things. And some of them do them all. Membrane permeability, channels that are open or closed, cause other enzymes or products to be made, activate or deactivate, stimulate mitosis, think of growth hormone. That's what it does. And these are the categories: water soluble, except thyroid, G protein, can't enter cell, fat or lipid soluble, steroidal and thyroid hormones, intracellular receptors, okay, and then immediately impact transcription and translation. And so you'll see they worked with these second messenger syndromes. All of them use calcium or cyclic AMP. That's the interesting about ATP. As we break it down, it forms ADP, which also has energy. And if we lop off a high energy phosphate from that, we make AMP, adenosine monophosphate, changes shape and becomes a messenger inside the cell. So it's a lot of uses for one molecule. Okay, and I'm not going to go through all that, or phosphodiesterase. That's this G pathway, showing you almost done, all that type of stuff. And these different pathways that are there, you'll have probably learned about that, maybe not. Smooth muscle, is calmodulin ringing a bell? Not really. I know he said that or she said that. Just didn't seem like it was something I felt like remembering. Sorry, forgive it. When you get into your profession, no one, I assure you, no one will ask you, could you tell me about calmodulin? Is Cal his first name or his last name? Hey, Gal worked with me for 15 years, my office manager. She said, she just look him in the eye and lie. God bless her. So we'll get there. And the lipid soluble one, I just want to show you may have seen this before. It enters to the membrane easily, complexes with a receptor inside, not on the membrane, and then makes its way in here to do its magic. And we'll stop it there. So we're making a brief class today. Back on Tuesday. I'll think of something clever to do in the lab next time. Okay, either with this or some other technology. So thank you.